Commander Vex 9 adjusted his optical sensors for the third time in 10 minutes, convinced they were malfunctioning. No, wait, make that the fourth time. The readings couldn't possibly be accurate. Humans didn't move like that. Nobody moved like that. Not even the legendary Krillian death dancers from the Outer Rim. "Sir," his aide, Lieutenant Crix, whispered through their communication implant, "the human female is still standing in the training yard." "I can see that, you overgrown space slug," Vex 9 hissed back, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "What I can't understand is how she's still breathing after what just happened." 3 hours earlier, Vex 9 had been enjoying what passed for a peaceful morning on Outpost Zeta 7. His morning ritual of reviewing casualty reports from the various species training programs had been proceeding normally. Krillians, 12 broken bones, acceptable. Zephyrians, 14 concussions, within parameters. Humans, 0 injuries, which was suspicious. That's when she had arrived. The transport shuttle had landed with all the grace of a meteor strike, which was typical for human pilots. They seemed to take pride in their ability to turn routine landings into near-death experiences. But it wasn't the pilot who had caught Vex 9's attention. It was the passenger. She walked down the ramp like she owned the place, which would have been amusing if not for the fact that she probably could. Average height for a human female, maybe 5'6" in their archaic measurement system. Brown hair pulled back in what they called a ponytail, a hairstyle that made absolutely no sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Why advertise a convenient handle for enemies to grab? But it was her eyes that made Vex 9's secondary heart skip a beat. Cold blue, like the frozen oceans of his homeworld, and absolutely fearless. She looked around the outpost like she was cataloging everything she saw for future reference. Every guard position, every weapon emplacement, every possible exit route. "Name?" Drill Sergeant Korthak had barked at her in his typical charming manner. Korthak was a Bruton, built like a small mountain and about as friendly as a plasma grenade with a faulty timer. "Maya Torres," she had replied, her voice calm and steady. No nervousness, no hesitation. Just facts delivered with the efficiency of a military report. "Well, Torres, welcome to paradise," Korthak had sneered, his tusks gleaming in the artificial light. "I hope you brought your will, because most humans don't survive their first week here." Maya had smiled, actually smiled. The expression had been polite, almost friendly, but something about it had made Vex 9's dorsal spines tingle with unease. "That's funny," she had said, still smiling. "Most drill sergeants don't survive their first encounter with me." The silence that followed could have been weaponized. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. Korthak's face had cycled through several shades of purple before settling on a particularly violent shade of crimson. "Did this meat sack just threaten me?" he had asked the air in general. "I don't make threats," Maya had replied, shouldering her pack. "Just observations." And that's how the morning had gone from routine to utterly insane. Korthak had decided to make an example of her. Because, of course, he had. The Bruton had all the subtlety of a supernova, and twice the destructive potential when his ego was bruised. He had ordered Maya to report to Training Ground 7, the one they used for live fire exercises. "We'll see how tough you are when you're dodging real bullets, human," he had growled. Maya had just nodded and walked away, leaving Korthak staring after her with the expression of someone who had just realized they might have made a mistake. Training Ground 7 was a nightmare of obstacles, barriers, and automated weapon systems designed to test reflexes, endurance, and survival instincts. Most recruits completed the course in 15 minutes, with minor injuries. The record holder, a Krillian named Slicks Hunter, had done it in 8 minutes and had required 3 weeks in the medical bay afterward. Maya had walked onto the course like she was taking a stroll through a park. "Standard rules apply," Korthak had announced through the speakers. "Reach the far end without getting shot. Medics are standing by to scrape up what's left of you." The first challenge was a corridor lined with pulse cannons that fired training rounds. Non-lethal, but painful enough to discourage casual tourism. The weapons were programmed to fire at random intervals, creating an unpredictable gauntlet that required careful timing and quick reflexes to navigate. Maya had taken 3 steps into the corridor when the first cannon fired. The training round, a bright blue energy pulse, streaked toward her center mass at roughly 300 meters per second. She caught it, not deflected it, not dodged it, caught it, with her bare hand, like someone might catch a thrown ball. The energy pulse, which should have sent her flying backward with a nice set of burns, simply dissipated in her palm like morning mist. "What the actual hell?" Lieutenant Crix had whispered, his translator struggling with the human profanity. Maya had examined her hand for a moment, flexed her fingers, then continued walking down the corridor. The remaining pulse cannons had fired in sequence, and she had either caught the shots or casually swatted them aside like annoying insects. "Check the weapon systems," Vex 9 had ordered, his voice tight with disbelief. "Those have to be malfunctioning." "Negative, sir," the technician had reported. "All systems operating within normal parameters. Energy output is standard." The second challenge was the Blade Maze, a narrow passage filled with whirring mechanical swords that swept across the path at chest and head level. The timing was precise, the margins for error non-existent. Most recruits spent several minutes studying the pattern before attempting the crossing. Maya had walked straight through without breaking stride. The blades, each one sharp enough to cut through standard combat armor, had simply stopped when they touched her skin. Not deflected, not blocked, stopped, as if they had encountered something harder than the finest military-grade alloy. One blade had actually broken. "Sir," the technician's voice was getting higher with each report. "The kinetic sensors are reading impossible impact resistance from the human female." "Define impossible," Vex 9 had replied, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "The readings suggest her skin has the durability of a starship hull." The final challenge was where things had gotten truly bizarre. The course ended with a 50-meter sprint across open ground, while automated turrets fired live ammunition from concealed positions. Real bullets, real danger, real consequences for anyone too slow or too unlucky. Korthak had been waiting at the firing controls, his expression a mixture of anticipation and barely contained violence. The Bruton had never liked humans, considering them weak and soft compared to the other warrior species. This was his chance to prove his point in the most direct way possible. "Last chance to quit, meatbag," he had called out. "These aren't training rounds. One hit, and you'll be decorating the landscape." Maya had looked directly at him, that same polite smile on her face. "Fire when ready." And Korthak had, without warning, without ceremony, without giving her a chance to prepare. He had triggered every turret simultaneously, filling the air with high-velocity death. 18 bullets had screamed toward Maya from 6 different directions. Military-grade ammunition designed to penetrate body armor and cause maximum tissue damage. Each round carried enough kinetic energy to drop a charging Bruton. Maya had simply reached up and plucked them out of the air. All 18 of them. With casual, almost bored efficiency, like she was picking fruit from a tree. The bullets had simply stopped in her hands, their lethal velocity reduced to 0 by contact with her skin. She had examined the rounds for a moment, rolling them around in her palm like dice, then looked up at the observation deck where Korthak stood frozen in shock. "Nice grouping," she had called out, her voice carrying clearly across the training ground. "You might want to adjust turret 3, though. It's pulling slightly to the left." And then she had smiled. That smile was going to haunt Vex 9's dreams for years to come. It wasn't cruel or mocking. It was friendly, genuine, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. It was the smile of someone who had just been shot at with military weapons and found the experience mildly entertaining. "What?" Korthak had whispered, his voice barely audible through the speakers. "What are you?" Maya had shrugged, pocketing the bullets like souvenirs. Human. And that was where things stood now. Maya Torres was still in the training yard, casually examining the automated turrets like a technician performing routine maintenance. Korthak was still standing at the firing controls, staring at her with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been violently restructured. And Vex 9 was trying to process the fact that everything he thought he knew about human capabilities was apparently wrong. "Sir," Lieutenant Crix spoke up again, "should we do something?" "Like what?" Vex 9 replied. "Ask her nicely to stop being impossible." The truth was, he had no idea what to do. The standard protocols didn't cover situations where a recruit casually caught bullets during live fire exercises. There probably wasn't a regulation in the Galactic military code that addressed supernatural durability in human personnel. "Maybe we should contact Command," Crix suggested. "And tell them what? That we have a human who can stop bullets with her bare hands? They'll think we're suffering from atmosphere poisoning." A new voice crackled over the communication system, and Vex 9's blood turned to ice water in his veins. "This is Admiral Krivox aboard the dreadnought Sovereign Death. We're receiving some interesting sensor readings from your position. Care to explain why there are weapons firing at Outpost Zeta 7? Admiral Krivox, the same Krivox who had personally executed 3 planetary governors for incompetence. The same Krivox whose tactical brilliance was matched only by his complete lack of patience for excuses. "Sir, we were conducting routine training exercises," Vex 9 replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Training exercises don't typically generate the energy signatures we're detecting." The Admiral's voice carried the kind of cold authority that made stars dim in respect. "Our sensors indicate repeated weapons discharge followed by complete energy dissipation. That's not normal." Down in the training yard, Maya had finished her examination of the turrets and was now walking toward the observation deck. Her stride was casual, unhurried, like she was taking an evening walk rather than crossing a battlefield. "Sir, we may have encountered an unusual situation with one of the human recruits," Vex 9 admitted. "Unusual? How?" Vex 9 watched Maya climb the stairs to the observation deck, noting how the metal steps didn't even creak under her weight. She moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, every motion economical and precise. "She appears to be bulletproof, sir." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like an eternity. When Admiral Krivox finally spoke, his voice carried a note that Vex 9 had never heard before. "Was that excitement? Did you just say bulletproof?" "Yes, sir. She caught 18 rounds of live ammunition without apparent injury or effort." "I see. And this human, does she have a name?" Maya had reached the observation deck and was now standing directly behind Korthak, who seemed to have forgotten how to move. She tapped him gently on the shoulder, and the massive Bruton spun around with a speed that would have been impressive if it hadn't been accompanied by a high-pitched squeak of terror. "Maya Torres, sir," Vex 9 replied, watching the scene unfold below. Excellent. I'll be arriving at your position within the hour. Do not, under any circumstances, allow Miss Torres to leave the outpost. Sir, she's not under arrest or confinement. We can't legally command her. The Admiral's voice cut through his protest like a plasma cutter through butter. You have just discovered either the most dangerous human in the galaxy or humanity's greatest secret. Either way, she's not leaving until I've had a chance to speak with her personally. The transmission ended, leaving Vex 9 staring at his communication console in growing dread. In his experience, when Admiral Krevox took personal interest in someone, that person's life was about to become very complicated very quickly. Down in the observation deck, Maya was having what appeared to be a pleasant conversation with Korthak. The drill sergeant, who normally communicated primarily through shouting and threats, was nodding along like an eager student. Whatever she was saying, it was having a remarkable effect on his attitude. Sir, Lieutenant Crix observed, the human female appears to be giving Drill Sergeant Korthak tactical advice about the turret placement. And indeed she was. Maya was pointing at various positions around the training ground, gesturing with the casual confidence of someone who understood weapons systems better than the people who had installed them. Korthak was hanging on her every word, occasionally asking questions that she answered with patient expertise. Of course she is, Vex 9 muttered. Because why wouldn't the bulletproof human also be a weapons expert? His day, which had started with routine casualty reports, had somehow evolved into a first contact scenario with a potentially superhuman member of a species they thought they understood. And now Admiral Krevox was personally coming to investigate, which meant Vex 9's career was about to become either very short or very interesting. Possibly both. He looked down at Maya Torres, who had apparently finished her impromptu lecture on defensive positioning and was now examining her fingernails like someone waiting for a bus. She looked so perfectly, utterly normal. Just another human recruit going through the standard training program. Except for the part where she caught bullets like they were soap bubbles. Lieutenant, Vex 9 said finally, I think we're going to need a bigger medical scanner. Admiral Krevox's arrival was announced by the kind of atmospheric disturbance that made small objects rattle and large ones question their structural integrity. His personal transport, a sleek Predator-class vessel called the Night's Edge, descended through Outpost Zeta 7's atmosphere with the precision of a surgical strike and the subtlety of a meteor impact. Vex 9 watched the landing from his office window, noting how even the hardened veterans on the landing pad stepped back when the Admiral's ship touched down. Krevox had that effect on people. His reputation preceded him like a shockwave, leaving a trail of nervous officers and rapidly updated wills in its wake. Sir, Lieutenant Crix reported, his voice tight with anxiety, the human female has moved to the recreation center. She's currently playing what appears to be a game of chance with several Krillian warriors. Of course she is, Vex 9 muttered, adjusting his dress uniform for the 5th time, because clearly what this situation needs is gambling added to the mix. The Admiral's footsteps could be heard long before he appeared. Each boot strike echoed through the corridor like a countdown to Judgment Day. When Admiral Krevox finally entered Vex 9's office, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. He was shorter than most people expected, barely 6 feet tall in the standard measurement, but presence wasn't about height. His silver carapace bore the scars of a dozen major campaigns, and his 4 eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had stared death in the face so many times they were on first-name terms. Commander! The Admiral's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Show me this impossible human. The recreation center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Off-duty personnel from a dozen different species were engaged in various forms of entertainment, from holographic combat simulations to games of skill that required appendages Vex 9 didn't possess. The noise level was substantial, a mixture of languages, laughter, and the occasional curse when someone lost at whatever they were playing. Maya Torres sat at a circular table in the center of the room, surrounded by 5 Krillian warriors who looked like they were questioning every life choice that had led them to this moment. The game appeared to be some variant of poker, with credit chips stacked in neat piles around the table's edge. "Fold," one of the Krillians said, pushing his cards away with the expression of someone who had just realized he was outmatched by several orders of magnitude. "Smart choice," Maya replied, collecting the pot with the casual efficiency of someone who did this professionally. "Anyone else feeling lucky?" The remaining Krillians exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their current predicament. Krillians were known throughout the galaxy for their strategic thinking and mathematical precision. They were natural gamblers, capable of calculating odds with computer-like accuracy. The fact that they were losing consistently to a human was generating whispers throughout the recreation center. "Perhaps we should try a different game," one of them suggested hopefully. "Sure," Maya shrugged, shuffling the cards with motions too fast for most eyes to follow. "I know a few Earth games. Ever heard of Texas Hold'em?" The collective shudder from the Krillians was almost audible. Admiral Krevox observed the scene with the intensity of a predator studying prey. His 4 eyes tracked Maya's every movement, cataloging details that others might miss. The way she held the cards with just enough pressure to control them without damaging them. The casual confidence in her posture that suggested she was comfortable in any situation. The fact that she seemed completely unaware of the attention she was attracting. "Miss Torres," the Admiral said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. Maya looked up from her cards, and for a moment her expression was perfectly neutral. Then she smiled, the same polite, friendly expression that had been giving Vex 9 nightmares for the past 3 hours. "Admiral," she said, apparently recognizing his rank from his uniform, "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Were you indeed?" Krevox moved closer, his boots clicking against the metal floor. "And what gave you that impression?" "Well," Maya set her cards down and leaned back in her chair. "When someone does something impossible at a military outpost, the brass usually wants to have a conversation. It's standard protocol in most civilized militaries." The casual way she said "impossible" sent a chill down Vex 9's spine. She wasn't denying what had happened or trying to downplay it. She was acknowledging it like someone discussing the weather. "I see. And you consider what happened today to be impossible?" Maya's smile widened slightly. "From your perspective? Absolutely. From mine? It's Tuesday." The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. Every conversation in the recreation center had stopped. Personnel from a dozen different species were watching the exchange with the fascination of spectators at a gladiatorial match. "Perhaps," the Admiral said carefully, "we should continue this discussion in private." "Of course," Maya stood, gathering her winnings with practiced efficiency. "Gentlemen," she nodded to the Krillians, "thank you for the game. We'll have to finish this another time." The Krillians nodded with the enthusiasm of condemned prisoners receiving a stay of execution. Admiral Krevox's private conference room aboard the Night's Edge was designed to intimidate. The walls displayed tactical readouts from major battles. The lighting was stark and unforgiving, and the furniture was arranged to put visitors at a psychological disadvantage. Maya walked in like she was visiting a friend's living room. "Nice ship," she commented, settling into a chair without waiting for permission. "Predator class, right? I've always admired the engine configuration on these models." Vex 9 blinked in surprise. Ship recognition wasn't typically part of basic human education, especially not detailed knowledge of military vessel specifications. "You're familiar with Galactic Navy vessels?" the Admiral asked, taking his seat across from her. "I read a lot," Maya replied with a shrug. "Technical manuals, strategic assessments, historical analyses. Knowledge is power, as they say." "Indeed. And what else do you read, Miss Torres?" "Oh, the usual. Military tactics, xenobiology, comparative weapons systems, advanced materials science." She rattled off the subjects like items on a grocery list. "I have a particular interest in defensive technologies." Admiral Krevox leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing on her with laser intensity. "Miss Torres, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I would appreciate a direct answer. What are you?" Maya was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "I'm human, Admiral. Just not the kind of human your intelligence files describe." "Elaborate." "Your species, and most others in the galactic community, encountered humanity during what we call our expansion phase. Young, eager to explore, relatively naive about the dangers of the universe. The humans you've been dealing with are representatives, diplomats, merchants, civilians." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "I'm not a civilian." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vex 9 found himself checking the environmental controls, convinced the life support system was malfunctioning. "You're military?" the Admiral pressed. "Not exactly. Think of me as quality assurance." "For what?" Maya's smile returned, but this time it carried an edge that made Vex 9's survival instincts scream warnings. "For humanity's integration into galactic society. You see, Admiral, my people have a saying, 'Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.' We hoped that joining the galactic community would be peaceful, mutually beneficial, a chance to learn and grow alongside other intelligent species." She stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars with an expression of casual familiarity. "But we also prepared for the possibility that it wouldn't be. And you are that preparation." "I'm one of them. There are others, scattered throughout human space and beyond. We monitor, we assess, we report back. And if necessary—" She turned back to face them, her blue eyes holding depths that seemed infinite. "We respond." Admiral Krevox was silent for a long moment, processing the implications of what he was hearing. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "How many others?" "Enough," Maya replied simply. "Enough for what?" "Enough to ensure that humanity's interests are protected, regardless of how the galaxy chooses to treat us." The Admiral stood up, his movement sharp and decisive. "Miss Torres, are you threatening the Galactic Alliance?" Maya laughed, a sound that was genuinely amused and somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. "Admiral, I'm sitting in your conference room, on your ship, surrounded by your crew, having this conversation because I choose to be here. If I wanted to threaten the Galactic Alliance, I wouldn't need to use words." She gestured toward the viewport, where the vast expanse of space stretched out before them. "Your sensors detected energy dissipation when I caught those bullets today. What they didn't detect was where that energy went. Physics says it has to go somewhere, right? Conservation of energy and all that." Vex 9 felt his dorsal spines tingling again, the same unease he'd experienced when Maya first smiled. "Where did it go?" he found himself asking. "I stored it," Maya said matter-of-factly. "Human bodies are remarkably adaptable, Admiral. With the right modifications, the right training, the right mindset, we can do things that other species find impossible." She held up her hand, palm facing outward, and suddenly the air around it shimmered with barely contained energy. 18 bullets worth of kinetic force, ready for redeployment whenever I choose to use it. The energy field dissipated, leaving only a perfectly normal-looking human hand. "So, no, Admiral, I'm not threatening the Galactic Alliance. I'm simply ensuring that humanity has options if diplomacy fails." Admiral Krevox was staring at her with the expression of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew about military power in the galaxy. "How long have you been monitoring us?" "Since first contact. Longer, actually. We've been watching galactic civilization for quite some time, learning, preparing, deciding whether or not we wanted to make ourselves known." "And you decided we were acceptable?" Maya's smile turned genuinely warm for the first time since Vex 9 had met her. "We decided you were worth the risk. Most galactic species have their virtues and their flaws, just like humans do. The Krillians are brilliant strategists, but sometimes too focused on short-term gains. The Brutans are loyal and brave, but can be overly aggressive. The Zephyrians are innovative thinkers, but occasionally lack practical application skills." She looked directly at Vex 9 as she continued. "Your species, Admiral, are natural leaders. You understand the value of cooperation and the necessity of strength. That's why humanity chose to reveal itself to the galaxy through Galactic Navy protocols. Because you knew we would handle the integration responsibly," the Admiral concluded. "Because we hoped you would. Hope for the best, remember?" Admiral Krevox was quiet for several minutes, his 4 eyes unfocused as he processed the implications of everything he'd learned. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of respect that hadn't been there before. "Miss Torres, I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand that your answer could affect the relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization." "I'm listening." "Are there more humans like you currently operating within Galactic Navy space?" Maya considered the question carefully before answering. "Define 'like me,' Admiral." "Enhanced, modified, capable of feats that our science says should be impossible." "There are humans throughout galactic space, Admiral. Some are diplomats, some are merchants, some are scientists, some are explorers." She paused meaningfully. "And some are guardians." "Guardians of what?" "Of the future we're all building together. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Admiral. There are threats out there that no single species can handle alone. Humanity's contribution to galactic civilization isn't just our technology or our resources or our perspective." She moved back to the viewport, her reflection ghost-like against the star field. "It's our willingness to stand between civilization and whatever wants to destroy it." The implications hung in the air like a challenge to the laws of physics themselves. Vex 9 found himself thinking about every human he'd ever encountered, wondering how many of them were exactly what they appeared to be, and how many were something far more dangerous. "What happens now?" Admiral Krevox asked. "Now? Now you decide what kind of future you want the galaxy to have," Maya replied. "You can treat this as a threat, in which case you'll discover just how thoroughly humanity has prepared for that possibility. Or you can treat it as an opportunity to build something stronger than any of our species could create alone." She turned back to face them, her expression serious but not unkind. The choice, as always, is yours. Admiral Krevox stood silent for a long moment. The weight of galactic civilization balanced on his next words. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone making a decision that would echo through history. Miss Torres, I believe humanity and the Galactic Alliance have much to discuss. Maya smiled, and for the first time since Vex 9 had met her, it looked completely genuine. I was hoping you'd say that, Admiral. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the species that moved between them. But somewhere in that vast expanse, the future had just shifted course by a few degrees, guided by a conversation between three beings who understood that the most important battles were often won with words rather than weapons. And in the recreation center of Outpost Zeta 7, 5 Krillian warriors were still trying to figure out how they'd lost so much money to a human who could catch bullets. Some mysteries, they decided, were better left unsolved.